What is the inner child? It includes what you learned as a child before puberty. So all of your development, everything you experienced, what it was like, what life was like before you grew up, before you hit puberty in your teen years. However, for many of us, we experienced trauma in various ways as a young child, and that leaves us with what we call a wounded inner child. If we have a wounded inner child, that will come out in different ways as an adult. So in this video, we're going to talk about some of the signs that may indicate you have some unresolved trauma and you have possibly a wounded inner child that is affecting your ability to live life most fully. So number one, you suffer from chronically low self-esteem and you feel that you deserve to be treated badly. This often manifests in getting into relationships, whether it be friendships or work relationships or romantic relationships in which you are chronically treated badly. When young children are particularly abused or neglected during those crucial young years, they get the message that they are not worthy, that they are worthless, that they are deserving of poor treatment. They internalize that message and then start to look to the world to treat them poorly. When that trauma is not healed, we grow up to continue to believe that on a very deep level. And we'll continue to seek out relationships in which we are treated that way. If you find that you have chronically low self-esteem and you continue to struggle with that, you may very well have a wounded inner child. Number two, you fear abandonment and struggle with trust issues. When young children are placed in situations in which they are chronically frightened or faced with chaos, whether it's physical or emotional chaos, when primary caregivers are constantly coming and going, often leaving, abandoning them, they learn that the world is a very untrustworthy place. They learn that people cannot be trusted. They learn that people they love will probably leave. If you have come to expect that people can't be trusted and people you care about can't be trusted to stick around, you might be struggling with a wounded inner child. One of the hallmarks of the situation is the sense that no matter how much somebody tries to convince you that they care and that they don't plan to leave, no matter how much somebody tries to reassure you, you never really feel reassured. And it may even get to the point where you'd prefer to be alone than abandoned. Oftentimes what happens is you push people away in order to save yourself from the pain of being abandoned. Of course, the end result is the same. You wind up being alone. So chronic trust issues and fear of abandonment are often the result of having unresolved trauma and a wounded inner child. Number three is free-floating guilt and a tendency toward perfectionism. Sometimes when young children, are constantly blamed for things that are out of their control, often by primary caregivers, parental figures, they wind up feeling as if they are responsible for the whole world when they grow up. What happens then is a constant, continuing sense of guilt for all kinds of things that are out of their control. If you find that you feel guilty all the time, and you are left with a continuing sense of anxiety over things that you have no control over, you may have a wounded inner child. In addition, a tendency towards perfectionism and a need for constant control can indicate unresolved trauma. This also occurs in families where children are parentified at a very early age, sometimes in families where parents have chronic illness, alcohol and drug addiction, psychiatric illness, other problems. Young children will wind up feeling as if they have to parent their parents. And because this isn't really possible, they are left feeling, again, responsible for things which are really out of their control. And this leaves a lot of guilt. Number 4 is you have a very negative outlook, a tendency toward pessimism, an expectation that bad things are going to happen to you. For young children who live in very unstable, abusive, neglectful environments, they oftentimes learn to expect the worst. They learn to give up on hope, dreams, optimism, because that protects them from disappointment and excessive unhappiness. They learn to feel more prepared if they can expect bad things. As an adult, we have more control over what happens to us in our lives. But if you, as an adult, continue to feel chronically plagued, that bad things are always about to happen, you may have experienced trauma which you have not yet fully processed. Number 5, you experience random episodes of anger, outbursts, and loss of control. If this happens to you, you may be experiencing tantrum-like behavior, which is left over from when you were a very young child and you experienced frequent episodes of having your needs not met, or terrible episodes of frustration which were not handled correctly. When we are in a healthy environment and we are a young child, we learn from the adults around us coping skills. Frustration and tantrums are normal when we are young, but in a healthy environment, we gradually learn how to deal, how to cope with stress. When we're not in a healthy environment, our needs go unmet, our frustration is not handled, and we don't learn coping skills. Instead, we are chronically frustrated. We are chronically left alone. We are chronically unhappy. And therefore, we are left only to continue to tantrum. So if you find yourself chronically having these episodes of extreme anger and random outbursts, you may be still left with some of these more childlike responses to emotions left over from childhood. Number 6, boundaries. So boundaries are imaginary limits we put in our brains that tell us when to stop people from getting away with certain things and push back. If you find yourself people pleasing and saying yes when you know it's not healthy for you to do so, then that may be related to some things that happened to you in childhood. When children grow up in unhealthy environments, especially when they've experienced trauma as children, they often have difficulty establishing what is okay and what is not okay in terms of their relationships with other people. It requires a certain balance in terms of self-esteem to figure out when to say yes and when to say no to other people. We have to feel reasonably good about ourselves. When we don't, and especially when we've been treated very, very badly, when there's been an especially cruel level of abuse, sometimes children will go out of their way to be very, very nice to other people. The idea being they never want other people to experience any pain at all on their account. And so they will become people pleasers, even to their own detriment. If you find yourself doing this, this may be related to having a wounded inner child. This may even extend to being overly kind to people you don't know, strangers, people you've just met. Again, to your own detriment, loaning out your house, giving large sums of money, putting yourself in danger, that kind of thing. Number 7, aggression and cruelty. The flip side of people pleasing is some people who have experienced extreme abuse, extreme cruelty as very young children will do the opposite of people pleasing and being extremely kind and nice to their own detriment, and will actually become aggressive themselves and be victimizers, cruel, abusive to people, to animals, to others. If you find yourself in this situation, it is quite likely related to having a wounded inner child and not having had the opportunity to process this past trauma. Number 8, having a lack of self-confidence and lack of confidence in the future, not knowing who you are. It is very common for children who have experienced abuse and trauma in their childhood to grow up into adults who have a great deal of a difficulty identifying who they are. In order to determine who we are, we need healthy adults around us to help us mirror who we are and who we want to become. When that's not available, we're a little bit raising ourselves in a vacuum, and we have a lot of trouble sorting out who we are. In addition to that, when our emotions and our thoughts and our ideas are not validated by others, we tend to feel that we as human beings are not valid. We are not worthwhile. We are not valid here on the planet. And therefore, we don't have the confidence to move forward into the future. We develop, as I said a few minutes ago, a very pessimistic outlook. And all of that together gives us a very little confidence in the future. If you find that you are sort of moving from career to career, idea to idea, having a lot of difficulty figuring out what you want, who you are, and you feel very pessimistic about the future, this might be related to some of the things that happened to you in the past. Number 9, you have trouble letting things go, a tendency to ruminate. If you have trouble letting the past go and letting go of negative things that happen in your life, a preference for clinging on to the pain rather than moving forward, even though positive things and positive change may be in front of you, this may be related to a wounded inner child. We have a tendency to cling to what is familiar. And when children are raised in painful environments, sometimes they'll stick with what's familiar, which is the pain, rather than moving forward into the unfamiliar, even though the unfamiliar may be healthier. So if you find yourself clinging to negative emotions, this may be related to past trauma. And number 10, which is very much related to number 9, is self-sabotage. If you find yourself constantly sabotaging your next move, so you get started on something and then somehow or another ruin it. You start on school and then you don't attend for a while and so you flunk out. You start a new job and then you don't show up for a few weeks and so you get fired. If you're constantly self-sabotaging yourself, this may be related to past trauma. Again, we as human beings are all much more comfortable staying in the familiar. And children who have been traumatized are used to chaos and pain. They are not used to routine and calm and positive outcomes. So every time life settles down and there's the possibility of success, if you find that you are drawn to actions which will uproot that success and turn it upside down and wreck it, this may be related to unresolved trauma in your childhood. It may be related to a wounded inner child. So I'm going to post here a list of the 10 signs that you may have a wounded inner child, and I'll also put them in the link below in the description of this video. There are others, of course. This is a very complex area, but these things are commonly associated with past childhood trauma and are very useful to pay attention to. So, chronically low self-esteem, fear of abandonment, guilt and perfectionism, a chronically negative outlook, random emotional outbursts like tantrums, trouble with boundaries, aggression and cruelty, not knowing who you are, and I should add, seeking validation from others constantly, trouble letting go, and self-sabotage. So that's it for today. Please think about those things. If you like this video, please remember to like it and subscribe. For more on psychiatric symptoms, please check out the videos in my link below, and I will see you next time. Thanks for listening. Hi guys, thanks for watching. If you're interested in another video on some of the psychiatric symptoms you should not ignore, please see my video here on top 10 mental health signs you should not ignore. You also might be interested to check out my video here on borderline personality disorder. A lot of people who suffer from signs and symptoms of borderline personality had significant childhood trauma and have unresolved childhood issues. And some of the things I talked about, including abandonment fears and abandonment panic, are included in my video on borderline personality disorder, so you might want to check that out here. Thanks again for listening. Remember, if you like this video, please like it and subscribe, and I will see you next time. Thanks a lot.